哦，对啊，对啊。
the September 5th regular meeting of the Clear Lake City Council. Madam Clerk, can you please call roll?
Councilmember Slotin,
Here.
Councilmember Purdock.
Here.
Councilmember Kramer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Overton.
Here.
And Mayor Clappy.
Here. Councilmember Kramer, could you please lead us in the pledge? The agenda. No modification. Motion from Councilmember Purdock, a second from Vice Mayor.
Motion passes with unanimous vote of the council.
Thank you. Let's move on to our first presentation from Executive Health Clear Lake regarding development of the
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to share issue that we have and
Could you, sir, could you
oh, I'm sorry, Chuck Cassis. I'm the administrator. And what I'm really looking for is support from. So our first, the issue in front of us is that Medicaid reimbursement very, and in order to continue to care for the community, we need so looking at various mechanisms to do that. Tax cost with tax based state. It's secondary way. State agency. So we actually think that the assessment really similar to well, nothing that
You in the meeting already?
for us to get feel that if we're not looking forward with solutions, our sustainability. Expenses. Anyways.
For you, Vice Mayor.
So what you're looking at, per se, you're talking about, but you're actually looking for the distance.
That is correct. Yes.
So if you create this district and the money's not coming to people, it's just state.
Yeah.
That's one.
Councilmember Kramer.
Tax, you're saying youth hospital,
We pay.
state, and then back to you with additional,
Dollar.
you're basically doing.
But could do so process really the structure like primary role. So because the hospital was have this present to the court. Slightly different from what that like for someone can correct. That's
Clarity, this would impact the Redbud Healthcare District, any of the structure of that.
You mentioned private health. The way the tourism improvement district works, whether you agree or not, you healthy provider, you have to pay. You take a medical.
This is purely for the hospital. For our hospital. So I brought up private. So it's only hospital.
I had a question, but Councilman, just to follow up, and I think you might have.
So this district just covered the hospital, not covered your various clinics?
It's for our hospital business,
Which include, not, so
it does include our.
it includes,
Slight
Is it possible for, so it includes clinics? Could be supported by the state to have other organizations.
well, the way that it's written, it's only hospital-based.
The way
So
it's
you
written
have
by you guys or by the state?
by the state.
Correct. So, correct. Any other questions from council? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess here, and we will return at 6:17.
What's it doing? Yeah.
Test.
You shut up.
Test.
You just have to go, yeah. Look at that, yeah.
Yeah, see the light right there, see how that just does that?
Big noise.
Sure. Yeah, she great. That's not this.
Just use the audio in their car. It was a
All right, we are coming back a little bit early. All right, so I think the council's asked several questions at this point. Feel free to continue. We have some experts online that can let us do.
Okay, so we have the other team members on. Zach?
No.
We can't hear anything.
We can hear you now. Thank you. You can't hear us?
We can hear noises like general sound, that's it.
Maybe putting the mic closer to you.
Jim, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Chuck.
So we kind of did an overview of the process.
And there was a question regarding the flow of funds from the match from the federal government to the state. Would you mind going through that for the city council?
Sure. So the, once a state basically certifies that they have the money, and essentially that's like, in your mind, sending it to the federal government. Federal government will certify that they can spend this money and send the money back to the state. That is a federal share. State will then take that money and send it out based on whatever program it received the money for from the federal government. So it's not physical transfer of money, it's all done via paper. But that's the way I would explain it to, I don't fully understand them. That's how I'd explain it, is that they do it via paper.
All right, any other questions from council? And so from us, you would need a letter of resolution?
When we get approval from the Board of Supervisors, we'll come back and ask for that resolution, yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your presentation. Thank you both. Looking forward to supporting you and have a healthy community.
Absolutely, thank you, and it's very nice to meet you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, item number 2, a presentation of a proclamation declaring September 2024 Senior Center Month. Whereas older Americans are significant members of our society, investing their wisdom and experience to help enrich and better the lives of younger Americans. And whereas the Highland Senior Service Center has acted as a catalyst for mobilizing the creativity, energy, vitality, and commitment of the older residents of Clear Lake and Lake County. And whereas through a wide array of services, programs, and activities, the Highland Senior Service Center empowers older adults to contribute to their own health and well-being and the well-being of their fellow citizens of all ages. And whereas the Highland Senior Service Center affirms the dignity, self-worth, and independence of older persons by facilitating their decisions and actions, tapping their experiences and skills and knowledge, and enabling their continued contributions to the community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Clear Lake City Council does hereby call upon all citizens to recognize the special contributions of Highland Senior Service Center participants and the special efforts of staff and volunteers who work every day to enhance the well-being of the older adults in our community. Signed September 5th, 2024. And would the president of Highland Senior Service Center Board join me up front?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie, for all you do.
Thank you very much. And I encourage everyone, once we get back into the senior center, we're going to have wonderful food and games and fun things for our seniors to do. And we're hoping that our seniors, especially that are alone, will encourage neighbors to come. And
Great.
I
Thank
wasn't
you,
going to
Stephanie.
say anything. First week in October.
All right. Moving on to item 3, presentation by the Recreation and Events Division. That's your comments.
Good evening. Good evening. Tonight, I just wanted to share a presentation regarding what we've done over the summer. We had a pretty good packed summer months, so I just wanted to share some key points. Hold on, we're having difficulty. We'll just do this. So this summer, we were able to provide activities and events for the community, especially the youth, ranging from field trips, concerts, arts and crafts, youth dances, Zumba, and bingo. Whoops. Change it. I'll just scroll. The benefits of summer activities are physical health, respecting of nature, refreshing your mind, creating memories, and increasing creativity. We did 2 field trips, which were made possible by a generous donation from the Rotary Club of Clear Lake. The first field trip we did was to the Owens Ranch. We brought 10 kids, or actually it was 13 kids, and a couple adults, including myself. We did horseback riding, we learned some gardening stuff. We had a bonfire and a s'mores and hot dogs over there. Here's some more pictures from the field trip. We also did another field trip to Tonka Mini Golf. Then next, we did 6 summer concerts, which was more than we've done in previous years. A couple of the concerts had 2 bands, so there was a lot of variety this summer. So here you'll find some pictures. We also did a youth dance at the youth center. We had about 20 kids there. We also had some parents that got out and danced and had a good time with the kids, so that was kind of fun. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we have Zumba, which, as you can see, is a pretty nice sized class. They enjoy it, and people are asking for more days a week. Recently, we had the car show. I called it the American Graffiti Car Show. We also played the American Graffiti movie that night. We also had the Soapbox Derby workshop. We had cars that were purchased by the city, and businesses and community members sponsored them. So the kids put them together. We also had Lieutenant Snyder and Sergeant Cook. They came out and helped to build the cars with the kids. Here is not only myself, Robin Smith is a really generous with her time and volunteers of almost everything that we do with the youth center and the recreation department. And then we also have Casey Miller and Adam Viramontes, who donate their time and work with the kids and anything that we need volunteers for. Now that the summer is over, we have more movies in the park. We're going to have the Robert Viramontes Memorial Soapbox Derby, which is next weekend. So if anybody needs something to do on Saturday, that's a fun event. We have the circus coming next week, trunk or treats coming up pretty fast, and the Christmas parade before the end of the year. And then if anybody has any questions, comments, or has any input on future ideas or how to make current recreational things better, feel free to contact me, and I'd love to hear your input. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Kramer.
Yeah, a quick question. Yeah. When is the Christmas parade with
It's the first Saturday in December.
the 7th?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item F, public comment. This is a time for any member of the public to address the city council on any matter that is not on the agenda, that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. The Brown Act, with limited exceptions, does not allow the council or staff to discuss items brought forth under public comment. If you are on Zoom, you can leave a comment in the chat tool there, and our city clerk will read it after we take all of those here in the chamber. So I have a couple that have already been submitted. We'll start with Mark Aaliyah. And we are limited to 3 minutes for public comment.
As stated on my request, is it okay if I ask a few questions to clarify how public comments are made before I start my time? Because once I start my time, you can't answer my questions.
Okay.
Isn't that true?
What are your questions about the public comment process?
Let me get my notes out here. I've got some clarifying questions. So I don't want to overstep my bounds. I was present at one meeting where Mr. Kramer, and I reply to you guys as Mr. and Mrs. as opposed to council and tongue twister. Mr. Kramer, got kind of upset with a lady saying her comment was rude and disrespectful. Okay. Councilwoman Overton, Mrs. Overton, got upset with a lady one time in a meeting and said,
well, to be clear, I think that the moments you're talking about are during agenda items where there can be a back.
I'm not complaining, I'm clarifying.
We don't know, but I think the moments you're talking about were during agendized items where there can be back and forth. No,
they can be back and forth, okay.
This period here, before we get to the agenda, we can't really respond.
Okay, gotcha. So basically I can come up here and say whatever I want, as long as it's polite and respectful.
Correct.
Right? And you can't say stop.
Unless you run out of time, I would never do that. You have the right to say whatever you want.
Okay. Then I've heard some comments from people that are crazy. I don't know how you put up with them. You know, some of them don't even make sense. But you let them go. Okay. That takes a lot of patience. Trust me. I've like pulled my hair out listening to them. One more thing. Would any of you like to read this before?
If you want to hand it to the city clerk here, she can pass that around. We won't read it before your public comment, but we can.
Well, the only reason I'm asking is, maybe Mr. Kramer wants to make sure that there's nothing rude written in here.
Are those your notes for public comment?
No, these are still questions.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe Mr. Lost my spot now. Mr. Purdock wants to make sure there's no speculative comments in here. Would you like to read mine?
Okay, so at this point, that doesn't seem like a substantial question about the public comment process, so now.
Okay, so why do you not want to read it?
Here's a point of order here. Out of fairness to the others that are limited to 3 minutes, as this explained, this is not an opportunity for back and forth. If you'd like to distribute something to the city clerk, it can be passed on at a later time, and so I would advise that the 3 minutes be started.
Okay, so I'd like to start with 6 minutes right now. And the reason why I'm saying 6 minutes is in the August 15th, 2024 meeting, there was a question submitted on Zoom. And that question was submitted by Mr. Ahard. His question was not asked and it was not answered of the public speaker, the guest speaker that you invited here to answer the public's questions. Do I get 6 minutes or do you want me to continue?
You do not.
Okay.
I listen, and that's on me. I apologize if I didn't ask.
Yeah, well, it's on you, all right. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna read here. Mr. Ahart's question. So you asked Madam Clerk here, I got these off of the Zoom meeting videos, okay? So Mr. Ahart's question was let's see here. If the city of Ukiah was not already in the water business, would the current JPA, couldn't understand the next word, the same? For instance, would the knowledge of the Savers program have factored in? Would there be faith in the city's ability to run the water district if the city of Ukiah had not been in the water business already? Would the consolidating water utilities be so willing to join the JPA? These questions, in my opinion, are layman's terms, you know, basically things people can understand. Mr. Claffey said with his first statement, Mr. Claffey criticized Mr. Ahart's submitted question. Mr. Claffey states Mr. Ahart's question has some speculation. I'll try to summarize. Summarizing a public comment is like mixing oil and water. They don't mesh, do they? You can't stand here and tell me what I can and cannot say, but you'll summarize a public comment coming in on Zoom? What's that called? Censoring? You censored Mr. Ahart's public comment. You stated, Mr. Costner had a good point here too. Ukiah's position as already having water service, did you feel that strengthened the conversation that you had with them? And the other part of your question, these are not Mr. Ahart's questions, these are Mr. Claffey's questions in supplement for Mr. Ahart's question. And then your approach when you first started the JPA, was it contentious early on? Contentious, I'm not smarter than a sixth grader, okay? Contentious means argumentative or disagreeable. So basically what you did with Mr. Ahart's comment, questions for the guest speaker, was you dipped it in your oil and discarded it in the trash.
All right, thank you for your comment, sir.
I'm done?
You've got 3 minutes.
Okay, transparency. Transparency is what the city council wants. Their oil does not belong in your water. It doesn't mix, it flows to the top. That's what their transparency is all about.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Ms. Alice Reese.
Good evening, council. My name is Alice Reed, and I work for the City of Beverly Hills. And I'm here in regards to a problem that started last year. And the mayor at the time was Mr. Purdell. He assigned a police officer, Ryan Peterson, to work with me on the problem, and that was great. And the incident stopped for like 9 months. It has restarted. I just can't believe that it hasn't, that it re-upped itself, because they had to get permission from someone. I don't know who that would be, but I can't believe they just had it closed for 9 months and already started. This business remodeled started a new business actually. They are not covered under their conditional use permit to be able to do what they're doing, because they applied for a new ABC license, which states that if there is a residence within 100 feet of a parking lot or a residence, they cannot open with what they're doing. I have called the police many, many times. My neighbors have called the police. And what I was wondering was if the city manager, whom I presented a petition signed by the neighbors in the neighborhood, ever, and of all the reasons why we were protesting this business, why did he show that to you? Did you guys know that that was even happening? This business has had never filed for any building permits. They changed doors, windows, additions. And plus, who knows what they did on the inside to set up a bar? Don't you have to have plumbing and electricity for bars? Their chisels that they use. They don't have a legal parking lot. They're not ADA compliant in any manner. On and on. And they make a lot of noise and they have a really, what they call disorderly house. People are drunk, smoking pot in the parking lot, making noise till sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning. Spinning out, racing up and down the street. My neighborhood has had it. And I would really appreciate it if somebody on the council could, because I can't meet with Mr. Good, the city manager. He's just too much of a bull to me. So, and I need that heartfelt because I've had many meetings with him and he's been very condescending and outright bullying. And I'm not going to put up with that. So we'd really like to hear from the council member, set up a meeting with myself and my neighbors and find out how, because this has got to stop. It's not, there's no compromise with us. It has to stop.
Thank you. We'll follow up. Mike Weber.
My complaint's also about the bar. My neighbor to the north is 50 feet from the bar. My house is 170 feet south of there. Now, on August 17th, 18th, there was loud music going on. That's Friday, Saturday. And on Friday, it sounded like there was a fight going on out in the parking lot. I didn't call. I wasn't gonna let it bother me. Now, on August 24, 25, more loud music. My wife called and complained, and officer showed up, and I don't know what he did, but didn't help. However, my wife has cancer, I have high blood pressure, and we got 2 little kids that were staying over on the weekend that got woke up by this loud noise. Now, this last weekend, I could barely hear the noise, which is fine with me. As long as I had the fan on, I didn't hear it. So that's my complaint. If you ask how I measured the distances, I have a measuring wheel, same type that CHP and the PD uses for accident investigation. So I'm pretty confident those measurements are accurate.
Any questions? Well, the only question I have is, are you connected with Ms. Reese?
Yeah, she's my neighbor across the street.
Okay, so we'll follow up with you, Ms. Reese, so since I have your contact information here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that is it for submitted comments. If anyone here in the chamber would like to make a public comment, please come forward. Seeing none, I will move to Zoom. Madam Clerk, any comments on Zoom?
There are no comments on the Zoom, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I will bring back and close public comment. Thank you all. Moving on to item G, the consent agenda. Does any council member want to pull an item from the consent agenda? Any member of the public? Madam Clerk, anyone on Zoom?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll bring it
I'd
back.
like to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Kramer, a second from Councilmember Sluten. Please vote in your form.
Motion passes with unanimous vote of the council.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on to item 8, a presentation and discussion regarding setting water rates. City Manager Flora.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So, as you know, we've been having a number of ongoing discussions about water-related issues in the city, and So we've asked Mark Hildebrand to come and give a presentation to the council about sort of rate setting for water rates. So Mark Hildebrand is a financial and management consultant with 18 years experience in helping local governments, federal agencies, special districts, and private companies bridge funding gaps and find strategic solutions to their business needs. Mark has a bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley and the University of Bordeaux, a master's degree from the Brown School of UC Santa Barbara, and spent 2.5 years serving as a Peace Corps volunteer at Madagascar. But he's an expert in water rate settings. We thought it might be helpful for the council for him to come and give a presentation about this process. And then, of course, we have Mr. Roscoe here that I asked to provide some additional follow-up related to infrastructure funding for development and some additional water rate comparisons. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark, who is sitting.
Great, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, welcome.
Great, thank you for having me. Again, by way of introduction, a little bit more, I do have about 20 years of experience as a rate consultant, primarily in California, but I've worked all across the states. My current clients include City of Santa Rosa, Cotati, Windsor. I've worked with Cloverdale. I'm working with a number of other cities up and down the 101 corridor. So I'm pretty familiar with the region. I am going to go ahead and share my screen here. And I have a PowerPoint presentation. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So as far as the agenda, I was just going to give a little bit of background on rate setting, legal requirements, which go into rate setting, the financial planning process, cost of service rate design. And then I was also going to talk about capacity charges, which are the charges that are assessed to developers when they join the system. So there's a separate set of legal requirements for those types of charges. And I was going to talk a little bit about some of the typical methodologies. So I have been briefed on the current situation that the city of Clear Lake is facing in terms of the different water purveyors that are in the region and the idea that some sort of regionalization model is being assessed. And so this rate analysis would be done within the context of understanding how your rates would be affected by consolidating with one or more of the different water purveyors in the region. This provides a little bit more data in terms of who those water providers are in the region. And you have a various number of connections and populations, all kind of in the same general size. So we're not talking about any massive utilities swallowing, tiny utilities. Are all kind of, by most standards, on the smaller size for water utilities. So the legal requirements for setting water rates in California are set by what's commonly known as Proposition 218. It's part of the California Constitution, and there's two major components. If you break it down, there's two major components to the law. The first one is referred to as the substantive requirements. In other words, how do you set the rates? And that really is based on the idea of proportionality. You can't charge more than the cost of providing service. So in other words, a profit can't be made. You can charge enough to maintain adequate reserves and to meet financial requirements, but you can't charge more than the cost of providing service and say transferring it to the rec department or something like that. It has to stay within the water utility. And then the proportionality component is making sure that the different types of customers are paying their fair share. So you can't purposefully try to charge more to, say, residential customers in order to keep business costs down. Everybody needs to pay their fair share, and that needs to be demonstrated in a clear and transparent way. So it's pretty simple concepts, and pretty easy to demonstrate in a report. The other component is the procedural component, which is just a noticing period. So you have to give notice to your ratepayers that you're proposing to change the rates. You have to send out a notification to all of your property owners who receive water service, and they have to be given 45 days notice before you hold the public hearing, during which time you plan on making the decision. And they are given the opportunity to protest against the proposed rates. And if more than 50% of your property owners come out and voluntarily protest against it, then the council is not legally allowed to increase the rates. That essentially nullifies the motion. But 50% do need to come out and protest against the rates in writing. So that's Proposition 218 in a nutshell. When we jump into the actual rate setting process, there's three main steps, and they're captured here on the slide. Revenue requirements, which is basically a financial plan, cost of service, and then rate design. So when we're talking about revenue requirements, what we are talking about is looking at all of the existing revenue that's coming into the water utility, and then all the expenses. And expenses come in different forms. There's operating expenses, such as administration, labor, maintenance, etc. There's debt service. So if the utility has any debt, they have to pay their debt. And then there's capital spending, which pays for any future capital expenses. So those are the three major components of expenses. And when we do the revenue requirements, we look at those expenses and what they're going to look like over the next 5 to 10 years, and apply inflationary assumptions to what those costs are. And we back into, okay, well then, if those are your expenses for the next 10 years, how much rate revenue do you need to recover from your customers? How much, in most cases, you have to raise rates in order to be able to at least keep up with inflation. So that's the revenue requirement step. Once you understand how much rate revenue you're going to recover from your customers, or you need to recover from your customers, then you do the cost of service analysis. And that's that part of Proposition 218 that I mentioned, that makes sure that you're allocating the fair amount of cost to the different types of customers. So customers drive the utilities costs depending on the size of their meter, how many of those types of customers exist, and how much water they're using. And so based on different ways of evaluating those costs of the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of water supply, we allocate costs equitably to the different customer classes based on those characteristics. And then the final step is rate design, which is essentially what the bill is going to look like when the customers receive their bill. So how much are you going to recover through the fixed portion of the bill, which is the part of the bill that doesn't change. Usually it depends on the size of their meter. And how much are you going to recover through the variable portion of the bill, which varies depending on how much water they're using. So those are the three principal steps of rate setting. So these are just graphics just to give you a sense of, this is from a different project, just an example. But if you do a rate study, you'll see something like this, which is a snapshot of, okay, here are the different types of revenues that we currently recover. And usually it's predominantly rate revenue that you get from your customers. Sometimes there can be grants or capacity charges from developers, or you sell a different type of water, such as wholesale water. And then on the expense side, there's a variety of different categories for expenses. This doesn't include capital expenses in this pie chart, but it's the operating costs and the debt service. And so it would break down the different components here. And so we would look at these different components, as I mentioned before, over a 10-year period to understand where we think those costs are going. The capital spending forecast is one of the more challenging elements of the financial plan, because it is the part of the financial plan that has the most amount of decision-making, variability. Capital spending is something that you can ramp up or ramp down depending on the sufficiency of revenue and of money. Sometimes you simply don't have the money, and capital spending is that category of spending that is on the margin. So in other words, when you run out of money, capital spending is usually the first thing that you have to cut back on. And most utilities in the United States in this day and age are looking at aging infrastructure. They're looking at capital expenses that exceed their ability to pay. And so a lot of the exercise of the financial plan is looking at, okay, how much money do we have to reinvest in the infrastructure in order to make sure that we keep up with depreciation and that we keep up with the infrastructure as it starts to age, and make sure that it doesn't fail, because replacing infrastructure after it's failed is significantly more expensive than replacing it before it fails. And so it really is important to try to have a proactive capital spending plan that stays ahead of the depreciation of the assets. On another note, there's the reserve targets. This is a bit of a nuance, but there is a certain amount of cash that you will want to keep in your coffers, rainy day fund, so to speak. And there's different categories for reserves. There's operating reserves to make sure that you always can cover your operating costs, emergency reserves in case some part of your system fails catastrophically, capital reserves to try to smooth out the volatility of your capital spending, and then a rate stabilization reserve helps you make sure that you can pay for your debt. So you don't have to have all four of these reserves. Sometimes, one or two reserve policies can be sufficient. I've worked with clients that have had upwards of 8 different reserve policies. So it's not a one size fits all in terms of these policies, but you do want to make sure that you have some form of a reserve policy because it is really important for your credit rating. The credit agencies look at different things, and one of the things they do want to see is that there's a formal policy to ensure that there's always enough rainy day money in your coffers for unforeseen incidents, and that really helps your credit rating, which in turn allows you to qualify for less expensive debt. This graph's a little bit more involved, but it takes all of the different pieces that I just talked about and puts them together. Again, this is just an example. These are not numbers that you don't focus on the numbers on the x-axis here. But it's what the top graph is basically comparing future revenues to future expenses. So the revenues here, the light green would represent the existing revenue. And the dark green would represent the additional revenue that you get from the rate increases that are shown at the bottom of the graph here. And this middle line graph shows the reserve targets and the projected fund balance. So you want to try to keep that projected fund balance aligned with your reserve targets. And so this is the final product coming out of that financial plan, showing that you have a plan for capital spending and that you've projected expenses to go a certain way, and that you've calculated the amount of rate revenue that you need going forward. When we switch over to cost of service and rate design, there are a number of steps. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but the ideas, I already covered it a bit in the beginning, but you start by identifying your total rate revenue requirements, and then we allocate the different costs of the utility to different functions. So you have a certain amount of costs applied just to your supply versus water treatment versus transmission versus administration, et cetera. And once you put those into those different buckets, you're able to calculate unit costs so that you can allocate, okay, this is how much it costs to serve each account, and this is how much it costs to serve different types of meter sizes, and this is how much it costs to send a gallon of water. Then we allocate those costs to the different user classes, depending on how many accounts there are and how many meters and the size of the meters and how much water they use. There are different types of rate structures. And when we talk about rate structure, we're talking about primarily the variable component. So the most common rates in California currently are either uniform rates, which are essentially every gallon of water costs the same. So usually it's measured in HCF or hundreds of cubic feet, and so there's a certain number of units. And if you have a uniform rate, then your first HCF costs say $3, and your last HCF also costs $3. It doesn't change regardless of how much water you use. If you have tiered rates, then you get a certain amount of water at, say, $2 per HCF, and then after you exceed a certain threshold, then you'll be paying $4. And the idea of tiered rates is to try to give the benefit of your cheapest source of water to your customers before you charge them for your more expensive source of water. That provides a mechanism for both promoting conservation and promoting affordability. Now, you can't design your rates for the sole purpose of encouraging conservation. You can't say, well, we want to cut back on water usage, so we're going to increase our rates, or we're going to have tiered rates, or we want to make our rates affordable, so we're going to design them a certain way. But if you can find a cost-based method, then you can make decisions about how you design your rates in the interest of achieving those goals. So again, tiered rates would be a cost-based method where you would calculate the cost of your cheapest water and sell that cheapest water at tier 1 rates, and then you would put your more expensive water at tier 2, and that would achieve the objectives of both affordability and conservation. Seasonal rates are falling out of fashion, but sometimes utilities have very different they have their costs change depending on the seasons, and so you can have seasonal rates. And then budget-based tiered rates are basically really complicated tier rates where the amount of water that you receive at the different tiers is calculated based on the very specific characteristics of each account. So, for example, single-family homes, you would actually look at, say, how many people live in the home and the size of the yard and all these different things in order to determine how much water you get in tier 1 versus tier 2 versus tier 3. Normally I would pause here, but I'm just going to go ahead and finish the presentation, and I can always back up and take questions if you'd like. So in terms of capacity charges, I mentioned that capacity charges, they have different pseudonyms. They can be called capital facility charges or developer impact fees or connection fees. These are all different ways of talking about the fee that is paid by developers or even just an individual when a new account joins the system. And the idea of the capacity charge is it's like joining a club, right? You're paying for all of the investment that went into the existence of the infrastructure up until that point. There's a lot of value to being able to jump in and immediately be served by existing infrastructure. So the idea of a capacity charge is to pay for all the costs that had previously been invested in the system. And then your rates going forward is the cost to continue to run and maintain that and replace that system. So the legal standard for how you set capacity charges is part of the California Government Code. It's 66,000 in sequence. And the standards are a little bit different than what I mentioned in Prop 218. In this case, it just needs to be based on estimated reasonable costs of providing service. There's two different approaches that are common for capacity fees. You can either do the buy-in approach or you can do the incremental approach. The buy-in approach is a bit like buying a used car. You're essentially saying, we have an existing system. We have plenty of room for new people to join. So we're going to charge you for what it cost us up until now to join the system. And oh, by the way, a lot of the stuff that we put in, we built it 30 years ago, and it's aging. And so the buy-in approach ends up being a bit cheaper because it does account for the depreciation of the infrastructure. The developers joining the system that has depreciation built into it, and so the fee ends up being a bit lower, and it's based on the value of the existing system. The incremental cost approach is appropriate when a system is completely built out and there's no more room. In order to serve new development, you need to build more pipes. You need to make the pipes bigger. You need to add more treatment processes or more infrastructure. And so that fee is going to be based on the cost of building more infrastructure, which is going to be brand new infrastructure. And therefore that cost ends up being a bit more expensive. So the right answer depends on the system and the situation that you find yourself in. Do you have enough room to accommodate new development, or are you at capacity? A lot of utilities actually use a hybrid because the answer is sort of a mix. Well, we have enough capacity in the pipelines, for example, but our treatment is at capacity. And so you do a hybrid of these two different approaches. And my last slide here is a very specific slide, but it was a topic that I understand the city may be facing. It's an interesting concept that takes a second to wrap your head around. But the question is, when you do need to take an existing, say you need to replace an existing 6-inch pipe with an 8-inch pipe. If that replacement were to be done just because that pipe was old and needed to be replaced simply because it was about to fail, and you replace the 6-inch pipe with a 6-inch pipe, then that cost would need to be paid for by your ratepayers, because that's simply a maintenance expense of maintaining the existing infrastructure, and it's not increasing the capacity of the system. And so 100% of those costs would be recovered through your rates. On the other hand, if you had a 6-inch pipe that was only a couple of years old, but now you have to replace it with an 8-inch pipe because there's a new development and there's not enough capacity, and so you need to go in there prematurely and replace that brand new 6-inch pipe with an 8-inch pipe, well, then that cost should be borne entirely by the developers. It shouldn't be paid for by ratepayers because they already paid for the 6-inch pipe. There's no reason to charge them twice. And then, as you can imagine, what I'm getting at here is that there's a bunch of gray area in between. What if that pipe is expected to have 40 years of life and it's at, say, 35 years, so it's not ready to be replaced yet, but now you're replacing it a little bit early because there is a development. And so there's different methodologies and different rationale for how you allocate the costs between ratepayers versus developers when you do have infrastructure that needs to be replaced, when the infrastructure does have some depreciation associated with it, but also needs to be replaced perhaps a bit earlier than strictly needed in order to accommodate growth. So there's this proportionate method, which basically proportions the cost based on the proportionate amount of capacity that is split between the different between existing users and future users. And then there's the incremental method where you're allocating incremental costs to the different parties, whether what's the incremental cost of upsizing the pipe had if you had only put in the 6-inch pipe, what's the difference in the cost of the project for a 6-inch pipe versus an 8-inch pipe? So there's a lot of nuance to this. I don't think that it's a topic that we want to get into too much detail. It's good for a healthy conversation, but there are standards out there and there's different ways to allocate these costs that we could talk about in more detail when the time comes. And that's the end of my presentation. I hope I didn't cover that too quickly, and I'm happy to take any questions and comments.
That was great. Thank you so much. Any questions from council?
My only question is, can we get a copy of that presentation to look at the various charts that we have?
Sure, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I sent the latest version. I'm happy to send it out.
It was a great presentation and answered a lot of questions I had, so thank you.
Great.
You talk about the incremental cost to be borne by new development. Sorry, the incremental, for new development, you said we have to use most likely the incremental cost analysis. But what is the situation if we have in this city a lot of lots that are, empty, and there were water lines put in 30, 50, 80 years ago. And now we have a lot in the subdivision from the 30s, 50s, 80s. Is that incremental cost of providing significant improvements for fire flow and those kind of issues, whose cost is that?
I'm sorry, could you explain what's the scenario? So you're talking about vacant lots that haven't been developed but are connected to the system?
Yes.
And when
So
those
the existing lines in there are not capable to provide enough water or fire flow to an existing subdivision that a lot of lots were not developed, but now they are. How do you do?
Gotcha. And I'm assuming that those lots never paid capacity charges back in the day. They remain unsold, and or at least they haven't paid capacity charges until now.
I don't know those.
Okay. So if they paid capacity charges back in the day, you can't charge them again. So you'd have to look back in your records to see if they were already paid, because whatever they paid back at that time was apparently appropriate for what the cost of connecting them at the time. Typically, they have not paid the capacity charge yet. They usually don't pay until they actually physically connect to the lines that cross in front of them. So in that case, it can be quite challenging, right? Because say that one lot that pushes the pipe beyond its capacity, right? You obviously can't bear the entire cost of replacing a 1 mile pipe with a larger pipe on your own. That certainly wouldn't be fair. But where does the money come from? And there's different answers to that. There's different ways of financing the cost of the project. To basically, the city could finance the project and then be repaid over time as development fills in. The city gets reimbursed for the cost of expanding the pipe to those different for the benefit of those lots. You can also create assessment districts where the properties, the cost of the expansion comes out of property taxes or off the property tax bill for the specific properties that benefit from the expansion of the project. So it's not a one size fits all, but there are different mechanisms for dealing with those situations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Craig?
Yes, learned a new term here a few weeks ago, other people's money grants. How would they fit in as far as trying to, if you have a grant, paying for infrastructure updating, that doesn't fit into a rate increase? How do you look at that?
Grants are fantastic to get, and I don't know Clear Lake's history in applying for grants, but I know that there are some out there that in particular benefit communities like Clear Lake. We take them when we can get them. I usually don't count on them when I'm doing a financial plan and the city says, "Oh, we're applying for these grants that may or may not hit." I usually say, let's assume we're not going to get it, because we certainly don't want to set rates with the hope that a grant gets a grant is granted and then it doesn't come to bear and now you're short. So I'd rather assume that you're not going to get the grant. And then the thing about adopting rates is that you can always decide to implement lower rates than what you notice. So if you say you're going to do a 10% rate increase next year, for example, but then it turns out you get the grant, you can always only charge 5% or whatever the appropriate number is, but you can't go up to 15%. If you didn't provide it in the notification, in the Proposition 218 notification and talk about the higher rate during the public hearing, then you can never charge a higher rate than what you notice, but you can always charge a lower rate. So that would be my recommendation is I would say, let's assume we're not going to get the grant, adopt the rates you need in that case. And then when the time comes, if you do get the grant, then we can always dial the rates back.
Okay, thank you. That was actually the answer I was hoping.
Question for you. So you're aware of the size of our city. You mentioned a couple of different reserve buckets. How much should a city of our size have in reserve if all those systems were combined?
So I'm not familiar with the size of the specific size of the utility. The operating reserve would typically be about 4 to 6 months of operating costs. So if your operating budget was, say, $2 million, then your operating reserve at 6 months would be $1 million reserve, or 3 months would be $500,000 reserve. Your infrastructure, your catastrophic reserve is usually an engineering assessment based on what part of your system is the most vulnerable. So if you have a pump station, for example, that, what would happen if it fell into a sinkhole? What would you do? Well, how much does that kind of sensitive or vulnerable part of your infrastructure, how much would that cost to replace it in short order? And say that might be a $2 million reserve along those lines. Your rate stabilization reserve would depend on how much debt you have. That is usually 1 year's worth of debt. So all these things sort of depend on the specifics of the size of your utility. But I would say that at the end of the day, a common reserve level ends up, when you add it all together, it's usually about the size of your annual operating costs or a bit more. So if your operating costs are about $2 million, then if you add up all your reserves, it can be $2 to $3 million reserves.
Great. The tiered rate system. So in order to bring that type of affordability, as I understand it, you need multiple significant sources of water, correct?
That's certainly the easiest way to do it. That's the easiest nexus to draw. There's other ways to do it, but ideally you have multiple sources of water. That makes the math really easy.
And do you know off the top of your head how many California cities have a tiered rate model?
I don't know the specific number, but I would guess that it's probably between 30 to 50%, maybe closer to 50% have tiered rates.
Great. Thank you so much. Any other questions for council?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make one point if I could. So most of the discussion here is about kind of the methodology for calculating the rate, which really doesn't change based on or shouldn't change based on the structure of the utility itself. I do want to point out, Mr. Hildebrand mentioned the Prop 218 process, which is the process that the city would be required to go through for rate setting as utility. It's the same process that Conockley County Water District utilizes, but it is distinct from the rate setting process that's utilized by Golden State Water and Highlands Water Company. So I just kind of wanted to underline that. As you know, for Golden State, being an investor in utility, they make an application every 3 years to the Public Utilities Commission. There's the whole process, which is underway right now, and which we're a part of that proceeding, and they ask the Public Utilities Commission for what they want. There's usually some negotiation, and then they implement a rate for the next 3 years. And then Highlands, as a private corporation, really has a whole different process, which does include a public hearing. I mean, they just raised their rates earlier this year, which means that they put a rate increase on the Board of Directors agenda with no additional notification to the shareholders. The Board of Directors approves that rate increase in this year's case, it actually happened literally behind a locked door, and then the rates are increased. So I just wanted to kind of underline and make sure that you understand the difference between the government structures on one house.
So Highland Water doesn't have to go by Prop 218.
Thank you, Mr. Floor. Seeing no other questions, we'll open it up to public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please come forward. Yes, sir.
I just had a quick question.
Oh, please talk to the mic if you could. So people on Zoom can hear you.
All right. Not really necessary, but I had the same question as Mr. Kramer. And then if I provide information, can it be emailed to me? Presentation.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yes, thank you. You're right, they probably require you to come up, so thank you. Any other questions here in the chamber? Please.
So we're gonna have another presentation, right? This presentation is not quite over. There's more to come.
Well, yeah, Mr. Roscoe is gonna talk a little bit more about rates and have a comparison sort of table.
I'll rather wait until that.
Okay, thank you. And actually, forgive me. So why don't we have Mr. Roscoe come up now and then. Okay, the question. Yeah, please come on.
Margaret Garcia, City of Clear Lake. I just had a couple questions I wrote down, so bear with me. You kind of explained that the expenses come out before the, as far as revenue requirements. And I'm assuming those are something that are yearly, that they come up with their expenses for the year, because that has a direct effect on what the rate, the revenue requirements will determine how the rates are set. Yeah, I had a couple. Oh, as far as grants go, I know that the City of Clear Lake hasn't been real proactive as far as applying for grants. I know that Lakeport, no, not true. Okay, well, I know that Lakeport, brought in a big chunk of like $10 million for their grants. I'm just wanting to stress that I think that grants have a big effect too on the rates, how they're going to end up if you bring in a good amount of grant money. So proactive on that. I don't know how you guys are set for applying for grants in the near future, but I'm thinking that you have that in mind.
Well, I don't think we've applied for any water grants in particular, but Mr. Clark, can you give us a bit of a recap of how much grant funding we've got?
How much outside money?
Other people.
Other people's money. How about that?
Well, you're asking a lot on the spot here, but I mean, just grants in, say, the last 5 years for infrastructure road stuff would be really close to 20 million. I mean, housing related grants have been received by the city. I was just actually going to announce to the council tonight, we just got word of another $21.7 million housing related grants. It's in the last 5 years. I mean, it's been well over 30 million that we received.
And you're talking road repair.
Roads, housing, a whole number of things.
Yeah, so
But we're proactive in getting grants.
that would be the main point, I guess. And let me just make sure I get my questions out here. I'm sure that growth obviously is being considered in a big way, because just as an example, as far as I'm not an engineer or a contractor, but if you're talking about going from a 6-inch pipe to an 8-inch pipe, right? And City of Clear Lake plans to grow and wants to grow. And I'm just wondering, maybe consideration of going from a 6-inch pipe to a 10-inch pipe. I mean, looking ahead for growth as you try to deter costs and expenses. That's just another, and let me just check to see if I've got any other questions.
I think Ms. Galenberg covered that in the capital spending forecast. And having a solid vision is important.
Oh, right. So I just want to make sure that is.
Last one, if you can make it tight.
Sure. You talked about reserves, that's great. I have one unrelated question, actually. I'm curious if the police department has purchased their drone.
Okay, that's simple. I'm talking.
Oh, no, I'll Tommy can answer that?
Not right now.
Well, it's a simple yes or no.
Well, Chief, feel free to nod or not. Thank you.
All right.
We'll follow up with you.
I
I'm sure one of those things in the back might have an answer.
Okay.
All right, any other comments here? Okay. All right, Mr. Ross. Oh, sorry, one moment. Madam Clerk, any comments on Zoom?
There are no comments on the Zoom, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Claffey. I think there's one slide. I wanted to share this information. In July, I presented information on rate structures for the 3 present water purveyors in the city of Clear Lake, and this is just additional information on some additional water systems. I used the same metrics, that is the 7.7 100 cubic feet is typical indoor use for the average use across California per capita.
Mr. Roscoe, just ask if we can make that a little bigger for you. We've got people kind of straining to look. Somebody straining to listen right here.
Well, it's gonna be hard to see all of them at the same time, but we can definitely zoom in and.
Zoom and scroll, maybe.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Okay, so the 3 columns on the left column is different water purveyors. The 3 columns are indoor use only for a family of 4, and the 7.7 100 cubic feet is that measure. That's roughly 750 gallons of water is 100 cubic feet. But this is not based on how much water is used in Clear Lake. This is based on the state average annual use for a person. So assuming 4 people, that comes to 7.7. So this is indoor water use only. So this might equate to a typical usage pattern in the wintertime when there's no outside irrigation. The middle column at 12.5 is a little closer to a typical average annual use. And the right-hand column would be a peak season use where there is some significant outside irrigation. And so I presented this information for Conocti County Water District, Highlands Mutual Water Company, and Golden State in July. Those numbers haven't changed. I do want to add a footnote on, because I did hear from the Northern California manager for Golden State after I presented. Apparently he was watching on Zoom, and he said, I didn't mention the fact that they've got a low-income program. And I didn't, so I should. Golden State has by far the highest rates, but they also are the only one of these that has a special low-income program, isn't allowed under Prop 218. That is, you can use other revenues to supplement low income if you're a public agency. Things like if you have a cell tower lease on your water property, that leasing income might be considered for offsetting rates for low income folks, but it can't be your cost of providing water. Prop 218 prohibits that. For an investor-owned utility going through the Public Utilities Commission, they can set rates different than Prop 218 requirements, and many investor-owned utilities in the state do have a low-income rate program. These numbers don't reflect that. I wasn't able to find how to apply for that, and you might need to be a customer to get it. I wasn't able to. So what I've done since is just look at other Lake County systems, and I just applied the same metrics, 7.7, 12.5, and 17.3 100 cubic feet. A lot of these other Lake County systems are also relatively high. A lot of these Lake County systems also draw water out of Clear Lake. And I mentioned to you earlier, Clear Lake water is incredibly difficult to deal with. It's not easy to treat water. And then below that are some other Mendocino County systems. We heard a presentation from the city of Ukiah. And Sean was here at one of your meetings just shortly ago. And so we were able to get, I'd like to thank City Manager Flora for that, some other information on some other, and most of these are relatively small systems. And some of these are very small. Willow County Water District has different rates for different zones in their system. That's not uncommon if you have higher zones that have extra pumping costs. That is, if you live lower on a hill, we don't have to pump the water as far up the hill to you, and so you get a lower rate. People higher on the hill pay a higher rate because there are additional costs to get the water to you. So again, Prop 218 is how much does it cost? And that's what you have to recover as. And so that's why there's two different numbers for Willow County Water District in Mendocino County. And I just gave, there's a zone 2 and a zone 3 also there in between those two. I just gave the boundaries. And so I thought this was, let you compare to see what other districts around are doing. I'd like to thank Mr. Hildebrandt for his presentation. I thought it was pretty thorough. I've been through a number of 218 processes before. I've been through a number of PUC processes before in my career. And you know, when 218 passed, it was a changed world for public agencies and how they set water rates. It's like enterprise. If you're a city doing it, it's an enterprise fund. You can't share that money that you collected in water rates with public services or parks or any of your other city departments. It's enterprise money. You got to account for it that way. And annual audits are required. So I mean, independent outside auditor every year. But I'd like to thank Mark for the presentation. Hopefully I'm happy to answer any of the questions about it. He's still around.
So just to be clear, that second section there, those are all pulling from the lake, all those water systems?
I don't know. I'm not sure Kelseyville pulls entirely from the lake, and I think the city of Lakeport has multiple sources. So they may have a blend of lake water and well water.
Okay, thank you.
About half of those on the list are groundwater.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Roscoe.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I will now reopen public comment. If someone wants to make a comment, please come forward.
Oh, sorry, Frank, go ahead. No, go ahead.
All right, good. You moved first, so.
Good evening, council members, members of the audience. So there was a Lake County News article, lakecountynews.com, it was a Thursday, 5th September. Mayor Claffey states, speaking about Highlands Water, with rates that are on average $45 higher per month than those of Konocti County Water. Konocti County Water District charges a base fee of $40.36 a month. Our cost of water is $4 per 100 cubic feet. So that's for a 5'8" meter. So that is, we charge a Konocti County Water District 4 cents for 7.48 gallons. All right. So if a customer that uses 800 cubic feet, that's 6,000 gallons per month, it would be charged $72. Highlands Water charges $41.60 a month base rate for a 5'8" meter. And the water costs $6.50 per 100 cubic feet, or 6.5 cents for 7.48 gallons. A customer of Highlands Water that uses 800 cubic feet per month would be charged $93.66, a difference of $20. So just talking about Konocti County Water District and how we're at our rates, how we've come to our rates now, and some of the improvements we've done to our system, I just wanted to read a few of the things. So I've been with the water district for 36 years. When we first started, we were had very poor facilities and our infrastructure was in very bad shape. In 1994, we spent $1.6 million to upgrade our distribution system. And we also replaced the 2-inch water mains we had with 6-inch and 8-inch water mains. In 1994, we spent $1.4 million on treatment plant upgrades, including new water pumps, new sand filters, new carbon filters, 2 new clarifiers, ozone system, new electrical motor control system, chemical pumps injection, and chemical injection system. 2001, we spent $4.7 million replacing the remaining 2-inch mains with 6 and 8-inch distribution system piping. We also added new storage tanks, 2 new storage tanks. From 2001 to 2015, we spent $700,000 replacing water mains and adding hydrants. In 2004, we spent $400,000 in automating the treatment plant and remote sites by adding SCADA automated computer system to run the treatment plant. Between 2006 and 2009, we automated we automated the distribution system water meters with radio read meters at a cost of over $400,000. In 2024, we spent $2.6 million replacing water mains and adding hydrants. In 2023-2024, we doubled our pumping capacity at the raw water pump house, doubled the treatment plant filtering capacity and pumping capacity, and upgraded the electrical and SCADA system. The plant capacity went from 864 gallons per minute to 1,500 gallons per minute. We've added 5 times the clear oil water storage, going from a 100,000 gallon tank to a 500,000 gallon tank. I know my time went out, but I just want to say that Conoctic County Water District has done a tremendous job in getting grant funds. Most of these projects we've done are grant funded projects. So even if you do a majority of your projects with grant funds, it doesn't mean that your rates are going to be as low as you want them to be. And one last thing, the city of Clear Lake is tied with the city of Lakeport with the highest tax rate in the county.
Before you leave, Frank?
Yes. Yes.
So I think your first grant was in early 2000s?
1994 is actually,
okay.
We did assessment district in a grant funded project.
And altogether to improve and build upon the infrastructure there at Conoctic County Water, can you give me an idea of what total grant monies you've received? Just ballpark it.
Probably about $25 million over the past 35 years.
Is there any way you could have done that just by rate increases or just using the funding from the ratepayers?
Well, our rates would probably be double what they are now. Right.
In your financial planning, I'm going to use kind of a strange example, but at a previous employment, we would use cars from the carpool, and we would pay so much per mile for every mile we drove those cars, not just for the gas, oil, and maintenance, but also projected to replace that car over the life of that vehicle. Is there something in your methodology, in your financial planning, that you would use a similar method for replacing that infrastructure?
So we do depreciation, so you have a depreciation schedule. So each piece of equipment that we improve, just like we're doing this, we've done $18 million in grant funded project over the past 4 years. We will assess how long the life expectancy of each one of those pieces of equipment is going to last, and then we'll assign a dollar value on that, and then we will have a depreciation schedule that basically is a planning tool guideline that lets you know how long that piece of equipment lasts and how much money you should save if you weren't going to replace it with grant funds.
Perfect. And that's just what I was looking for. What about the plant? How do you estimate your replacement of equipment in the plant?
Each piece of equipment is assessed and valued individually. It's like say a piece of electronic, like a computer. Computers don't last very long.
Sure.
That's going to have a very short lifespan. But like a tank will last a very long time. Maybe 50. You could get maybe 75 years. I mean, that's if you get the maintenance correctly on it. So I can't give you a straight answer. It's just that each piece of equipment would be separate.
Sure, but just in the same conversation we're having with the presentation and what Mr. Roscoe shared, I just want to hear what Conoctic, what if you weren't able to get those grants? What would you say the condition of your water system at Conoctic County would be?
Well, I would hope it'd be still in good condition. It's just our rates would be higher.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Roscoe. Any other comments here on the chair?
What would be the cost to the city to buy up Conoctic Water and Gate?
So those are two separate entities. Conoctic is a county special district. Golden State is an investor. I don't think we have estimates on what it would cost to buy up Golden State. But
Is that what you're looking at doing, is to buy each, or just take over the nonprofits?
we're looking at all our options right now, yes.
But nothing is in stone? I mean, you haven't.
No, there's been no offers made at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes?
Yeah, I noticed from the rate comparison that was up there.
Can you introduce yourself, sir?
Oh, Darren McCosker. DHRN, MCC, OSKUR. I just noticed from the rate comparison that, again, half of them were, groundwater systems, which are incredibly less expensive to operate than, you know, what Clear Lake's. I'm a T5 because of Clear Lake, because of the technology it takes to make drinking water out of that water.
Where do you work, sir?
Sorry?
Where do you work?
I work for California Rural Water Association. I provide technical assistance to water agencies in Northern California. It's my territory. I'm here as a citizen, so I'm not here on official capacity. I did work my first 11 years with Golden State Water. And it is an investor-owned utility, and I just wanted to highlight the fact that when you put the rate comparison up, they don't charge anything for installing a new water meter. So they have no impact fees. So they have to recover that cost in other ways. So, I mean, I've lived in Clear Lake for about 43 years, and I'm always seeing comparisons on rates. And, you know, having worked for Golden State Water, it's kind of an unfair comparison because it's better for businesses. And, you know, there's positives and negatives to all the different mutual water companies, county water districts, and investor-owned utilities. So it's not always apples and apples. It takes a very comprehensive comparison.
Councilmember.
I'm sorry?
I said, no. So just from that's why I want to know what you did and where you worked. And if you're not comfortable answering this question, just tell me and that's fine.
Sure.
But I'm curious, so if I wanted to build a new house on a vacant lot within Golden State Water District area, what would that cost me for the meter and the connection? Do you have an estimate on that?
Mark, is it still free?
I'm not here on a company.
Okay.
At one time it was free.
Yeah.
I could say that here and things have changed.
Okay.
From 20 years ago.
Yeah, I live in Sacramento, you know, I'm not in Clear Lake anymore, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I still follow, you know, the news, and that's why.
Then, never mind. It would be fair for me to ask you the next question. So.
Thank you, sir. All right, any other comments here in the chamber? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, any comments on Zoom?
Thanks, Mark, for clarifying that.
There are no comments on the Zoom, Mr.
Thank you.
Mayor.
I'll bring it back to council. Any other comments or questions before, City Manager, you don't need any direction at the moment, correct? All right. Thank you all. Thank you for all those who answered our questions. Thank you, Mr. Hildebrand and Mr. Roscoe, for your presentations. Really appreciate it.
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you again. If I give my card to one lady.
Oh, beautiful. All right.
Just to get the presentation. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 9, consideration of response to 2023-24 grand jury report on the City of Clear Lake Animal Shelter. Mr. Flores. Sorry, Chief Housekeeper.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight I'm going to briefly go over the grand jury report, our responses, our proposed responses to the findings and the recommendations. Late in or beginning of July, they issued a grand jury report for the 2023-2024 fiscal year entitled City of Clear Lake Animal Shelter. So I'm going to go over what their findings were and our response to their findings and the recommendations and our responses to those. And just for clarification for anyone that's listening, these findings and recommendations are related to the animal shelter, not the animal control side and field enforcement, those types of things. It is related to the animal shelter. So the findings, their first finding was the animal shelter is overcrowded with more than 40 to 45 dogs housed there. The proposed response is in agreement with that. Finding 2, the 10-year contract at $375,000 per year has no provisions for an increase over time. We also agree with that. Finding 3 is that timely medical care is not always provided. We disagree with that. The city and North Bay are committed to ensuring that all animals receive timely medical care. There are instances when animals dropped off, usually by the police department employees outside of their hours, and have injuries they may not be immediately recognized. Once North Bay staff can explore those injuries, they get proper medical care for those animals. And it's the city and North Bay's priority to provide all animals with the care they require as promptly as possible. The fourth finding is that there continues to be an overall lack of communication between North Bay and the community. We agree with that. Finding 5, that cleaning practices need improvement. We disagree with that. North Bay uses the recommendations of the UC Davis Veterinary School for cleaning practices. And finding 6, that there is no set schedule for food deliveries and expired food is being fed to dogs. We partially agree with that. City of Clear Lake and North Bay agreed that there are no scheduled deliveries for food. That is due to the fact that deliveries are determined by the needs of the shelter, which changes due to the population. Obviously, the amount of food they have, if the shelter is full or over full, they'll need more food versus when sometimes it gets down to lower numbers, they don't need near as much food. If they buy too much, then the food will end up being expired and not being used. Additionally, North Bay gets the food from a local feed store to ensure that it's get quickly and timely and quality food. Recommendations: that the city of Clear Lake limit the population to 40 to 45 dogs at this time. That has been implemented. The city of Clear Lake and North Bay recognize the importance of maintaining a population of fewer than those numbers. Obviously, the lower, the better. And while we strive to adhere to this target, the population can fluctuate due to various factors beyond the city's control, such as responses to calls, mandatory seizure of vicious or injured animals, pregnant animals giving birth while in the shelter, hoarding cases, which can involve an unknown number of animals, sometimes very high number. And these unpredictable circumstances make it a challenge to accurately forecast what the shelter population is going to be. Next one here, recommendation 2, that the Clear Lake City Council review the contract with North Bay Animal Services annually. This has been implemented. The contract between the City of Clear Lake and North Bay requires to provide an annual report regarding the provisions of services under the contract. This provides the City Council the opportunity to ask questions and review the performance of North Bay. The City and North Bay are fully committed to maintaining a strong and transparent relationship. Currently, North Bay submits monthly reports to the City Council, providing regular updates on the operations, including adherence to contract terms. If either party feels a review is necessary, it can be requested at either time by the City Council or North Bay. And the existing 10-year contract offers a stable foundation for both the community and North Bay to address evolving issues. Recommendation 3, that the Clear Lake City Council exercise regular oversight of North Bay to ensure that timely medical care is provided. This has been implemented. The city and North Bay agree that health and well-being of animals in the care of North Bay is paramount. The City Council's monthly reports offer valuable insights, confirming that medical care and health standards are being met promptly. This process, combined with routine inspections and open communication between North Bay and the City Council and the Police Department, strengthened by new quarterly updates that will be shared with staff and the council, ensure that any issues are swiftly addressed. These new updates, they'll include some more medical things regarding cost things, treatment of animals, different things that we haven't been typically reporting every month. I just want to mention that North Bay and the city strive to do, get medical care timely. It's also important to recognize that Lake County, much like the rest of the nation, has a pretty big shortage in veterinary services. North Bay does work closely with local providers, depending on their availability, and then also uses vets in the Sonoma County to supplement the limited resources we have in Lake County regarding veterinary services. Recommendation 4, that the City Council ensure that North Bay improve the communications with the public. This has not yet been fully implemented, will be implemented in the future. There are improvements being made. The city and North Bay both recognize that effective communication with the public is crucial to the shelter's success. To strengthen this connection, North Bay has begun implementing a comprehensive communication plan that includes regular updates, increased transparency, and an accessible website to ensure information is readily available and understood by the public. North Bay is consistently sharing information through multiple channels, including social media, their website, and they're committed to continually trying to improve these efforts with new techniques. Some of them including the increased transparency in the reports that we'll be doing quarterly to the City Council. Recommendation 5, that the Clear Lake City Council ensure that North Bay comply with the terms of the contract regarding the University of California Davis Veterinary School's recommendation for cleanliness. This recommendation has been implemented. The Clear Lake Police Department conducts inspections of the animal shelter and a review of the North Bay cleaning standards. North Bay is committed to maintaining the high standards in full compliance with the recommendations of UC Davis, as they're crucial for preventing disease and ensuring a healthy environment for all animals. And then lastly, recommendation 6, that the City Council support regular food deliveries through a local food distributor. This has been implemented. As I mentioned earlier, they source the food, typically source it from a local vendor, so they can get it quickly delivered and get high quality food from them. So again, these are the proposed responses from one of the responses. The R2 would be from me, and then the R1 or F1 through F6 from the City Council. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Thank you, Chief. So after you submit these, what's the process with the granger?
Yeah.
No, after we approve it, is there any follow-up process from the granger?
No, they just post the report, well, the report's been posted on the website. Once it's complete, they post the responses that they get on the website, and that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Fred?
Yeah, Chief, I think you mentioned at one point North Bay's will be doing more regular reports. Are we going to hear a report directly from North Bay, from Mark?
We did the annual report this spring where Mark Abe did his presentation on the annual stuff. Other than that, at this point, we haven't asked him to come do more regular reports. Like I mentioned, we plan on doing the quarterly one with some more detailed stuff. At this time, I don't think we've determined who's gonna make that report. The contract does require you to do an annual report.
Given this grand jury report, I'd like to hear directly from Mark prior to the annual report, which would be next spring.
Yes, it was early spring that we did this year.
I would really like to hear a report directly from him. Sooner than and have the opportunity to ask him questions.
Does that require a contract amendment? If he's only required to come once a year?
I mean, we could talk with him and see. I'm sure you probably have something figured out.
Thank you.
He does have to supply the monthly reports, right?
Yes, he does. He gives us monthly reports for the brief presentation that they've done.
I do think that it could, from what I've seen, and I've not always been directly involved in this issue, but more communication between North Bay and the general public, not just us, would be a good idea to help their standings in the community.
I agree.
All right, any other questions from council? Seeing none, I'll open up to public comment. If you want to comment, please come forward.
I just had a question regarding spay and neuter clinics, the possibility of that happening in the city of Clear Lake, or I guess maybe the county, but spay and neuter clinics are, I've actually got some kittens that were a surprise to me, and it's extremely expensive, to spay a cat. They gave me like $500
Point of order.
I'm sorry?
That's off the agenda item.
Yeah, we're on a report, not to the grand jury, not on a questioning of what we can and can't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I'm just thinking it'd be a good idea, and it would
We
be.
all want that idea.
Yeah. To speak more clearly, as far as finishing your sentences, you trail off, and I'm like struggling to follow you. So that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments here in the chamber? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, any comments on Zoom?
There are no comments on the Zoom, Mr. Mayor.
You'll bring it back to council.
I move that we approve the response by our police chief to the grand jury report of the Clear Lake, City of Clear Lake Animal Shelter.
Second. I have a motion from Councilmember Sluten, a second from Councilmember Kramer. Please vote in your portal.
Motion passes with unanimous vote of the council.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, moving on to the city manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So I wanted to highlight, just in case you missed it over the last few meetings, we've been having some problems with our sound system. We have put the wheels in progress to have sound system replaced here. So I think that work is scheduled in October. So hopefully it's not too far off, but apologies for that. We've been kind of trying to keep the thing tied together. It's obviously not working well, so we'll be replacing that soon. Mentioned some grants earlier. That topic came up. I just had on my list to share with council that we finally got final award notices from CDBG Disaster Recovery Program for 2 grants that we applied for some months ago. One is additional $1.5 million for our code enforcement activities, which should fund our existing programs for another 3 years. And then the $400,000 for technical assistance for water consolidation efforts. So those were both approved. And this is the same program through which the county received the nearly $1 million for the LG Sonic program that really is just a testament to Supervisor Sabatier's tenacity in making sure that there was a way to get that funded. So appreciate that. And then, as you know, there's been work done for a number of years on the mixed income housing project near the hospital, and that's state-owned property, and for a variety of reasons, they've had a difficult time getting that project funded. And so there has been extra money in the disaster recovery program, so they reorganized the pots of funding. And this was one of the projects on their radar. They actually wasn't through a competitive process of any type, but they allocated additional $21.7 million to that project. And so that developer is quite excited in being able to get really close to the finish line there. There is a little bit additional funding that will be needed to complete that, but having this funding in place is going to make them score much higher, and they're pretty confident that they'll be able to get going early next year on that.
Could you just repeat that last part? I got distracted with the phone ringing about the last grant amount you were just talking about, the 21. Right.
Well, I'm not sure what you didn't hear, but so this is not the final piece of funding they need to start construction, but the other funding they're able to bring helps the scoring on other programs. So they've already applied for other funds through the state. I sent them a letter, because HCD is large, and so sent the other kind of division a letter letting them know that they are going to be getting this other funds, which should make them score much higher and get the final piece of funding they need to move mean, they've already done a lot of design work and whatnot. So hopefully they'll be able to get that project going relatively quickly.
Thank you.
Okay, so a couple other things. I've had some questions from some of the individual council members, and Mayor Clappy specifically asked about this the other day, and so I wanted to provide some follow-up related to the Rite Aid that we have here in town. As you know, they filed for bankruptcy sometime back. I don't remember the exact date now. I don't know if it was the end of last year, but and we had obviously concerns about whether our store was going to close here. They closed about 25% of their just over 2,000 stores. Just earlier this week, they emerged from bankruptcy, though we operate as a private company now, not as a publicly traded one. Rite Aid Corporate has assumed our local lease through 2033, which is a good sign. And they said that while it's generally not a high prescription store, it is overall good performer in their portfolio, and it is one of the they call go forward stores. So there's no expectation that there's any risk to that store closing someone shut up. And then sort of two other water related kind of updates. So as you know, we have 3 large road infrastructure projects underway right now. And, you know, this is one of the challenges that we run into with not being, you know, essentially having control of utilities as well as that are constructed in the right way, as well as the road infrastructure. And so, you know, there are a lot of aging pipes under those streets, and I just wanted to give kind of, you know, this is not something we can get into a question and answer session about, but just to share with council, some that's just come up in large part over the last few days. A couple of weeks ago, the first issues we ran into was with the what we call the ballpark project south of Redwood Park, which is in Highlands District. And there was a number of pipes in very poor condition. They're planning on replacing a small amount of that pipe and essentially leaving the rest of it in the ground and, you know, kind of praying that it was going to last the 5 years of our pavement cut moratorium. You know, which is a very frustrating situation to be in, because this is, you know, these are significant projects. This is, you know, certainly the last time in my career here that any of these roads are going to be paved. You know, there's going to be maintenance over the years, but this is our shot at it. And not being able to coordinate and have the infrastructure in place that's necessary, not knowing when that's going to fail, cause us to dig up that street. If it's 6 years, yeah, according to our ordinance, the water district doesn't have to pave the whole street, but we still have what should be a very nice road with a trench down the middle. So fortunately, the conversations with Highland staff have continued, and it sounds like at this point they are planning on identifying the funding and replacing pipe under those streets. So that's good. So there's a small portion of that project that also has some Canoctay County Water District infrastructure there. No impacts to that I'm aware of. The other 2 projects, including the largest one mileage-wise in Clear Lake Park, are on Golden State's territory. So they've been doing a lot of work. I'm sure you've seen the construction, particularly on tree streets. They've been replacing a lot of things, but there's a couple issues on both of those projects that came up there. Are some abandoned pipes and tree streets in the street and are shallow. The proposed engineered treatment of the roads, what we refer to as FDR, I'm sure you're familiar with, the full depth reclamation, where they go in and grind everything up, mix it with cement, and then come back later and pave on the top. It's a very stable base. We have significant concerns about being able to grind that deep and not continually running into abandoned pipe infrastructure. And then there's several sections up in the park where there's water mains that are as shallow as 4 inches under the existing surface. So per our franchise agreement with Golden State, it's their responsibility to relocate those utilities out of the way of our work. But we did have a meeting with them today, talked through the things they're going to be working through, some issues there. We don't really know what the solution is. I mean, the easiest solution is for us to change our engineered road section and not do an FTR treatment, do something shallower. The problem with that is that turns what is a 20 to 25 year project perhaps into a 15-year project. And again, this is the one time that we're going to be doing this when all of us are involved. And I don't think it's a good use of public funds for us to immediately pivot to that. So we're going to be asking them to figure out a way to resolve this at their cost per franchise. So that's the update there at this time. And we had a good meeting with Golden State, and they're going to do what they can to figure this out, and we'll keep the council updated as that goes forward. And then the final thing that I wanted to share is you've all seen hundreds of signs popping up around town and a lot of mail going out. And Highlands, per the court order, did notice a new shareholder election. Unfortunately, there's a number of issues with that being conducted per the court's directions. And so earlier today, we did file a lawsuit against Highlands Water asking for the court to grant a temporary restraining order to stay that election that's noticed for next week. And additionally, asking the court to appoint what we would call a referee to oversee and administer the shareholder election in a way that's fair to all the shareholders in our community. So there is a hearing tomorrow afternoon at the courthouse in Lakeport regarding that request. So we'll keep you posted on that. So that's right.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilmember Purdle.
Sir, just to go back, and I'm grateful that our Public Works Director is here. How are we progressing on the road paving projects? Is there any concern that we may not get it done before November, or we would have to stop?
The only concern is figuring out the water infrastructure in a way really right now. So.
Can you give me a percentage of how much is completed and what's yet to come?
Particularly.
Ballpark.
Oh, the ballpark.
No, I'm sorry. Just a ballpark.
For Clear Park, they have paved about half the tonnage so far.
Okay.
Tree Streets has only been going for a couple of weeks now, so all they've gotten are some culverts. And Ballpark probably has about 80% of the curb and gutter done so far.
Thank you very much.
Couple more months.
You want to continue, Councilmember Purdle, with your report?
Okay, I have not attended any city-led meetings or committees that I serve on. And I did want to mention that we did host or hold a board meeting for the Clear Lake Chamber of Commerce. And our date for the Luau at the Creek is October 5th. And tickets are on sale now, and we're looking for sponsors. It's always a good time, and local fire dancer troupe will be there. And we're even talking about maybe bringing in some shave ice, because that's always a favorite.
Councilmember Sluten.
I really don't have any city meetings since the last council meeting, so nothing to report.
Councilmember Craig.
I don't have any city-related meetings that I can talk about. We did host a candidate forum for District 1 supervisorial candidates a couple weeks ago in Moore Lake. It went pretty well. And more importantly, Laco News will be sponsoring a forum here for city council candidates on September 16th here in council chambers at 6 p.m. That's a Monday. And that's about all I have.
Vice Mayor Overton.
I was at that last meeting because I was at a Meals on Wheels convention in Maryland, which
led to a connection to Yellow County. So hopefully there's something there, believe it or not. They think we can do something together to help keep our seniors up here functioning, because again, we're back to the pre-pandemic funding, which means our center doesn't have funding. So just to let you guys know, we're struggling, and we're gonna have to work hard to get this done. I will be going to the League of Cities regional meeting in Eureka next week. And if any of you guys want to go, you need to let them know by tomorrow. We're asking for a confirmation on that. And then I got really didn't go to any meetings either, because I've been really busy trying to get our center ready to move into. So we're having a yard sale tomorrow, Saturday, till 6 o'clock. So that makes it to where everybody can come, and it's gotta go. So anybody who wants to come after Saturday, give me a call, and whatever's left over is gonna be a grab for grab. So hopefully we'll be getting that, moving back in by October. That's what I'm sorry. Refrigerator and freezers are working, some problems, but they're working, which is why we need to take a little bit of time moving in so that we make sure that they're working correctly. So that looks good. Looks like we're on the go. So I'm kind of anxious to get back in there. So.
To open when for?
Well, we're hoping for the 31st of September is what we're hoping, because that's the first, day of the next year, 4th of October. So.
Thank you. I did want to note that the Clear Lake Animal Association, the SPCA of Lake County, and the Dogwood Animal Rescue organization is hosting a spay and neuter clinic potentially in February. So I was going to report on that anyway. So Great County Fair last week. We have something even greater next weekend, and that's the Soapbox Derby. Cannot wait for this. I've learned that I'm not a great racer, but I'm not a great engineer either. My car's gonna win. I just have to find a kid to race it. So if you haven't yet, you can still sign up, build your cars. They don't have to be glamorous or fast, but we want to have the community involved. This is a great event. It's great for the youth. You saw the cars that our wonderful police department built. They're probably going to be pretty fast as well. So come bring your best.
Where is it at?
So that it's going to be on Dam Road by the college on Saturday morning, September 14th. And if you have any questions, just reach out to Tina and she can give you all the details. All right, that is it for me. Any future agenda items? Seeing none, we are now adjourned to closed session. Thank you all for joining us today.